Hello. Did you know that the total spend on corporate trainings last year was nearly $350 billion? And how much of it was completely wasted? Nearly $300 billion. Why? Because studies show that less than 20% of the knowledge that people gain in a classroom or an online training gets converted into on-the-job actions. Think about it for a moment. $300 billion wasted on behavioral change interventions. That amount is more than the GDP of 77% countries on this planet. In this video, we are going to find out why it happens through a behavioral science framework called COM-B. The fact that knowledge doesn't necessarily gets converted into action is not news for us. For example, we know what it takes to lose weight. Eat vegetables, lift weights, and go for runs. It's that simple, but is it easy? Obviously not. If it was, I wouldn't be struggling to lose those extra pounds for nearly a decade now. Similarly, texting while driving or overspeeding can be fatal. We all know that, but people still do it. Hence, we can safely assume that knowledge is not sufficient for change. This human tendency that knowledge doesn't necessarily change our behavior is commonly known as knowing-doing gap. People by now know the importance of giving direct feedback, but they still don't. They also know the importance of showing vulnerability to build trust, but they still don't. The list is never ending. Though we all have experienced this phenomena, but surprisingly, we continue to overinvest in building knowledge and information about behavioral skills. These skills could be psychological safety, inclusion, strategic thinking, collaboration, you name it. But unfortunately, we completely ignore or forget about the fact that most of this knowledge will not convert into actions. Every year, people go through multiple classroom workshops, online courses, case studies, but there's no impact to show. Let's dig into why it happens. Why do we find it difficult to convert our knowledge into actions? Well, it's pretty simple. Either the person remembers the knowledge that they need to apply or they have forgotten about it. First, let's look into the situation where the person has forgotten what they learned in a training. Now, in that case, it's pretty simple. You can't really apply something which you don't even remember. We all forget things, but the forgetful nature of human beings was first studied in a structured way by a German psychologist named Hermann Ebbinghaus in 1885. His study showed that if the knowledge is not applied, we forget 50% of it within first hour of learning and 75% of it within next 6 days. Almost 90% of the information gets forgotten within a month. No wonder that you don't remember most of the workshops that you have attended in the past. This phenomena is known as forgetting curve. However, there is one more interesting thing. It is possible that the knowledge that you got from a training is still saved in your memory, but you're unable to retrieve it. This is fairly common. You would have experienced it when you come across a face and you find it difficult to retrieve that person's name. This happens because there are no cues saved in your brain to retrieve that specific memory. If the person remembers the knowledge from the training but still are not applying it on the job, then the situation is slightly complicated. And to understand this situation, we'll use a framework called COM-B. Capability, opportunity, motivation, behavior. We are using this specific framework because if you ask people why are they not applying the knowledge that they learned, you'll get 100 different answers. And those answers will not be easy for you to act upon. Our aim is to identify the root cause for this knowing-doing gap, and COM-B frameworks provide us this structured way of understanding the situation and identifying what are the barriers which may be becoming the reason for this gap. As per this framework, any behavior can be broken down into 3 parts: capability, opportunity, and motivation. And to achieve the desired behavior, you need to address all 3 of them. Whenever you find your people not applying the knowledge, I suggest using this framework to identify what can you do to increase the impact of your trainings. Let's study these 3 barriers one by one, starting with capability. Capability simply means that do I feel capable of taking the action that you expect out of me? Capability barrier could be both mental or physical. Let's understand it through an example. Assume you have sent your people for a one-day diversity and inclusion training. In that workshop, the trainer covered the importance of inclusion and how it can drive or improve productivity. The trainer also covered unconscious biases, which are the main reason why we show non-inclusive behaviors. By the end of the workshop, your people understand the importance of inclusivity, and they may also remember the reason why they may be showing discriminatory behaviors. However, a week after the training, you are seeing no changes in those participants. They are taking no specific actions which can improve the diversity or inclusion in their teams. The first thing you need to check is whether the participant feel physically capable of taking those actions. By physical capability, I mean, do they have the stamina or the physical strength to take these actions? You'll notice that at workplace, most of these soft skills or behavioral change interventions will have no problem when it comes to physical capability. But it is possible that your people don't know what do they need to do specifically on a daily basis to be inclusive. Maybe they don't know how to design an inclusive job description, or what specific questions do they need to ask during an interview. Or we can say that they don't have the mental skills or the understanding to take those actions. This means that they don't have the psychological capability to be inclusive. More often than not, especially at the workplace, it's the lack of psychological capability, not the physical capability, that is the main barrier to any action. What you're doing through trainings is essentially trying to build their psychological capability. But the problem here is you don't know what they're thinking in their head. Are they feeling capable or not? And unfortunately, even if you ask somebody after the training, do they feel capable? Because of the social pressure, most of them are going to say yes. I mean, no one enjoys the feeling of looking less capable at office. Opportunity. Opportunity barrier is when people are not sure when they need to take this action. Like capability barrier, even opportunity barrier can be divided into two parts: physical opportunity and social opportunity. Physical opportunity becomes a barrier when the person doesn't have the resources, tools, or the time to take that desired action. If we apply it to our inclusion training example, what would a lack of physical opportunity may look like? It could be the absence of structured guidelines, interview manuals, or simply the lack of diverse candidates in the interview pipeline. Or, and this is very important, they are just too busy to remember that they need to be inclusive during these processes. Essentially, there are no reminders, there are no triggers in the systems to make them remember that during the interview or during those team meetings, they need to be inclusive. On the other hand, social opportunity barrier would mean that there is no social support or the organizational environment doesn't support this desired behavior. If no one around you is taking those inclusive actions, you don't want to be the odd one out. In such cases, the employee may feel that they are swimming against the tide or they are going against the organizational unwritten norms. Motivation barrier. Lack of motivation is usually the most blamed one at workplace. Automatic motivation, when you act basis your habits, emotions, and impulses, which means you feel motivated to take any action without even thinking about it. This motivation is not conscious and driven through our values and beliefs and mindsets. For example, you may instinctively feel more comfortable with a candidate who's similar to you, in a way showing your similarity bias. Hence, you'll end up being non-inclusive. Reflective motivation is when you have thought carefully and you have decided to act basis your goals and you have your own reasons. In our example, the manager has carefully thought about hiring or not hiring somebody from a diverse background, and they are taking a conscious call to hire somebody who's similar to them. In their performance appraisal, there are no diversity hiring targets. All they are assessed on is the sales they bring in. So we have learned how to apply COMBI framework to identify barriers to action. The great part is that this framework can be applied to any kind of behaviors. You may be wondering, now that you have understood COMBI framework, what's the first step? Well, the answer is start talking to your people. Understand from them what are the common themes which are emerging within capability, opportunity, and motivation barriers. Once you have identified one or two main barriers, you can then start designing interventions which can address those gaps. In my next video, I'm going to cover the practical steps which are based on behavioral science that you can take in order to close the knowing doing gap. Thanks for watching. If you want to apply more behavioral science and less gut feelings at your workplace, you can go through my book, or visit nudgeable.ai.